It's amazing how much we change over the course of our lives, especially if you're lucky to make it to the big 5-0. Before you know it, you're there, and in my case, with a lot less hair. From not knowing anything whatsoever the day we're born to feeling like we know more about life than we can handle by the time we're adults, all we know is all we are. And while no one will ever know everything there is to know, we can all do a better job at filtering out the bullshit. Especially if you grew up Catholic like I did, or if you find yourself living in a communist dictatorship like my parents escaped from in Cuba. If there's only one nugget of wisdom I can impart before you tune out of this video, if you want to make it to 50 and beyond, it's imperative to learn the difference between the truth and bullshit. And even when something is true, you still need to ask yourself, is this a good idea or a bad one? And even once you learn how to filter out bullshit like Sherlock Holmes and learn how to make better decisions, one of the other biggest lessons I've learned from living 50 years on this planet is the need to manage your expectations. And not just your day-to-day expectations, but your desires, aspirations, and idealism too. There is so much about life we cannot control, and that often includes ourselves. Now I'm beginning to see what people mean when they say free will is somewhat of an illusion. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot we can and need to control, such as managing our expectations. But so many of the decisions we make in life are really being guided by forces that are not within our control. And I'm not talking about demons or karma or that life is divinely preordained either. That's precisely the kind of hippie, trippy bullshit I've learned to ignore. What I mean by free will being somewhat of an illusion, or even a luxury for that matter, is that our bodies are organisms which mostly function on autopilot when it comes to breathing, digesting, and circulating blood, for example. And how we perceive and navigate life is predetermined by our physiology and our environment. And that's part of the reason why some people say, if you're not a liberal in your 20s, you have no heart. But if you're not a conservative after your 30s, you have no brain. I like to add to that saying, if you don't realize there's a time and place to be liberal and there's a time and place to be conservative by your 40s, you're not thinking things through enough. While it's true, I do find myself becoming more conservative as I age, that doesn't mean I'm becoming more religious. Quite the opposite. The older I get, the more atheist I become. Because the more I learn about how life actually works through science, history, and simply experience, the more I find it incomprehensible that billions of people can't see religions for the demonstrable falsehoods they are. But I understand why the majority of people are either blind to these falsehoods or in denial of them. Because life is a bitch, and then you die. I've come to peace with that t-shirt slogan, which makes a lot more sense to me now than when I first saw it as a kid and it traumatized me for a week. And the reason why life can seem to be such a heartless, indifferent bitch is that life boils down to a constant chaotic collision of atoms. Most people don't want to hear that, but it's an irrefutable scientific fact. We're all made up of atoms that cannot be created or destroyed, but instead are in a constant state of change according to the first law of thermodynamics. And from matter and energy's ebb and flow of chaos and order, we get everything we know to be life, the universe, and just about all of reality. And the more you accept reality for what it is, the easier you can adapt, overcome, and make the most out of life. Which is why I've learned to accept life for what it is. And I don't really care why we're here, because there may not even be a grand reason why. All of existence just is what it is, and it probably had no creation point, let alone a reason to continue. Much like religious people are willing to believe that about their God of choice. And that's why I no longer worry about the fact that I'm going to die. Though I'm still a little concerned about how I'm going to die, but I've also learned to not sweat the small stuff, especially stuff that hasn't happened yet. And I've also learned to be extremely grateful for the time and place I was born into. Because if there is something I've learned to reject more than religion, it's socialism. And I especially reject the murderous tyrannies it takes to impose socialism onto societies. And even though I'm an atheist, thank fucking God that I wasn't born in Cuba where my family's from. And I say this with all due respect and love regarding how many of my relatives were born and raised in Cuba, clearly beyond their control, and who had to endure that utter fucking bullshit. At least with Catholicism, I was able to walk away from it after the age of 18. Granted, that's because I was born in Spain in the 20th century as opposed to being born in Spain in the 19th century when the Spanish Inquisition would have had me tortured to death for denouncing Christianity. However, even now in the 21st century, you can't just walk away from a murderous dictatorship like the one in Cuba. You have to struggle to get out of that socialist tropical gulag. And if you're doubly unlucky to have a family who is in denial of Castro's disgusting cult of personality that still persists even after that megalomaniacal, narcissistic parasite's death, then you're really screwed. Yet that's another lesson I've learned in this life. Not everything is going to make sense. Not everyone is going to be sensible, responsible, let alone kind and altruistic. Because again, the very fabric of reality is a constant chaotic collision of atoms where matter and energy are in a constant state of change from one form to another. This is why all living organisms need to consume other living organisms in order to survive before they die anyway. Even if you're a cute furry bunny, you gotta kill a carrot sometimes. And concepts such as human rights, reason, and freedom especially, they're just byproducts of nature, not the other way around. All the civilization so many of us enjoy and sometimes take for granted is the result of a long, arduous process of trial and error where countless people died over the course of hundreds of thousands of years to get to where we are now. That's why the older I get, the more I try to make the most out of life. And one way I do is by making videos like these that hardly anybody watches, but that's okay. To a large degree, it's almost beyond my control to put them out there. In a way, it's almost therapeutic. Because apparently, this is the personality type I am. A hyper-reflective person that feels the need to understand reality and make as much sense of it as possible, even as I realize there probably is no ultimate reason why anything exists in the first place. By the way, that's why I believe being an atheist makes any good deeds I do much more genuine than that of religious people, let alone communists. I'm not being good because I fear hell or much less an authoritarian regime. I continue living and doing good, or at least not being an asshole, simply because it's worth it. Sure, I could kill myself if there really is no point to it all, but fortunately, I enjoy living life, and that's the thing. I don't need a reason to enjoy myself. As long as I'm not hurting anyone else in the process, I've learned to never deny myself the opportunity to be happy, if at least for a few minutes at a time. And it's not because what goes around comes around. If that were true, tyrants like Fidel Castro and Adolf Hitler would have been skinned alive and roasted over an open fire for days in order to truly repay the incalculable damage they've done to millions of people. Yet that's another sad lesson I've learned about life. Horrible things can and do happen, and justice isn't always served. But while there is no evidence that what goes around comes around, everyone reaps what they sow. And if you do good towards others, or at the very least don't go around being an asshole, you will sleep much better at night and have more energy to make the most out of your life. Because things don't happen for the best. It's a matter of making the best of the things that happen to you, especially things you can't control or even avoid. While I wish I had heard much of this advice when I was younger, it's sad to think I would have ignored most of it anyway. This is why youth is wasted on the young. When you're young, you almost can't help yourself from making stupid mistakes. And I think it's because that's the way our brains retain information. Life lessons almost have to hurt in order for us to remember them. This is also probably why history continues to repeat itself. Some generations have to learn the hard way. But then again, not everything will make sense in this life, so manage your expectations and choose your battles wisely, especially the hill you're willing to die on. Because even though we're all going to die someday, it doesn't have to be sooner rather than later, and much less involve a Darwin Award. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos, and check out the links below for my original art and merchandise. And thanks for watching.